Welcome back, everyone. In this video I make one of my favorite projects that I made in the past. It's a more or less farmhouse style bench, and the what makes this bench kind of unique is the legs, because I connect the legs and the seat with dovetails, which is one of my absolute favorite types of joinery, the dovetail joinery. Not because they are not because they are just good looking, but they are also kind of the, for me, especially for me as a furniture maker, it's kind of the type of joinery what I think furniture makers are most known for, the dovetail joinery. And for this bench I use some old wood that I just collected over the years, and because I want to make this like on other projects I did in the past, I want this bench to look very rustic, and kind of with screw holes or with some dents and nicks here and there. I kind of like that. But as even if you want this rustic look, you still need to prepare your material properly, and this is why I still push those bolts over the jointer, and also I rip them down to the right width on the table saw. But as you can see here, the surfaces are not perfect. I wanted to keep this kind of grayish look and this kind of used look of the boards. Yeah, I like that. I mentioned that I liked it, and I tried to get to remove on the jointer, as well as on the table saw and on the planer, as little material as possible, just to kind of provide that old look. And like I did on other projects, you probably heard this before from me, I do not have a written down plan or even a drawing, nothing like that. I just have some kind of measurements and some and the look in my head. That's all. And this is, again, I mentioned this before, I do not aim for the boards here for a certain thickness. I just push them through the planer as far as I get a good surface that is useful and workable with. Here I noticed that I forgot a screw in the boards, and I only noticed it when I was at the table saw. So this is why I inspected very quick how the saw blade looked after, because I had a screw in the board, but the saw blade still looked good enough. Not damages at all, just a little damage on one of the tooth. So I kept using it. It's still workable with, but you always want to make sure when you hit some metal with your saw blade, just make sure the saw blade isn't damaged afterwards. There's still, even though that I do not aim for a certain thickness, as I mentioned, there's still lots of planing here, which also fills up very quick my dust collection, and I have to empty the dust collection regularly. And it's not a big deal, as you saw. Only takes just a few moments. Okay, now comes the glue up. First I glue those legs together, and like in other projects, I think I also mentioned this is in another video, you don't need necessarily always, you don't need to alternate the grain when it comes to glue up, especially when you do a joinery like this, because everything is later is getting put together with dovetails, and this joinery is so strong it kind of keeps those boards straight by itself, so you do not necessarily need to alternate the grain on those boards. Just a few clamps, but I also noticed a little bit of a stepping, so I put some small clamps on as well to keep the board as straight as possible. I use my finger again to spread the glue. I also mentioned this before in another video. Don't do this, or you probably won't do this, but it's just some kind of, yeah, I just can't stop myself doing this. So here I noticed only one little stepping, so this is why I only have one little clamp to keep the boards flat. Now comes the seat. I use pipe clamps for that. And as far as, if I remember correctly, it's not the joint was not 100% perfect tight, so that's why in this case I used a little bit more clamps. And those pipe clamps are usually very strong, so that's why I used those. And they have big capacity. I usually do the glue up the day before. You do not necessarily need to wait that long. You could probably wait 1 or 2 hours for to wait for the glue to dry. But it's to get the best condition. It's better to do the glue up the day before, like I do here. Then it can dry overnight, and then you can be 100% sure that everything is dry and tight and solid. Nothing's worse than remove the clamps and then you notice, okay, there's a joint that opens up because of not enough dry time for the glue. I tried to clamp it with one of those quick grip clamps, but that wasn't strong enough, so I used another pipe clamp. And here there was a little bit of a chip out, a surface chip out, but instead of removing the chip, I just glued it back on, and I used some I think it's an old grinding wheel to add some weight on the chip out. Worked pretty good. Then I cut it to the right length here on my miter saw. It's yeah, it's a little bit too big for the miter saw, so I flipped it around. Then I use the belt sander to remove some of those steppings that are still there between those boards, and also to remove all the glue. But I don't mind to see those marks from the cross sanding, from the belt sander. And I mentioned this before in other videos. I even like the marks of the sander for this type of furniture, for this rustic furniture. Get those. So these little shorter boards are for the legs, and I just cut them to the right length, to the same length. Then I give it a light sanding, just a light sanding, to remove some of this marks from the sander, but not all of them. And here I have some little, what is it? I think it's live edge, but live edge very often, especially on this type of, let's say, cheaper wood, comes with lots of loose parts, lots of chips. And I use the sander to sand this live edge smooth and get rid of loose parts. And here I'm already preparing for the dovetails, and the dovetails will be a little longer than the boards are thick, because I want to have those dovetails protruding, and I think it gives everything a everything looks a little nicer then, in my opinion. And then I have this little marking jig that I made, I think years ago. It's very old. But to be honest, I haven't made a dovetail since a while, so I do not expect to have all those dovetails perfect. Here I mark for the legs, I mark every part that needs to get removed, because when it comes to dovetail joinery, nothing's worse than start with cutting out and remove and chiseling out parts that are wrong. So this is why I always mark the parts that I'm going to remove later. And here to cut those slots, I use my Japanese Ryoba saw. I usually start with, because the Ryoba saw comes with is a two-sided blade. One is technically for cross-cutting, one for rip cutting. I use this side that is for cross-cutting because it's has a smaller teeth. I start with this to get a little bit of a little small slot, and then I turn the blade around to finish the cut with the rip side blade, with the ripping side of that blade. And it works pretty good. I really like those saws. And as I mentioned in another video, when it comes to the use of hand tools, I always prefer to use hand tools as long as it means that I do not lose too much time with it. But it's a great pleasure to use hand tools. I remember I made one of those benches before with power tools. I think to cut out the dovetails, I think I used a jigsaw. It worked, but it was a lot less fun, and it also, the result was not as I was hoping for at that time. It was good enough, but not perfect. So I decided, when it comes to those joinery, I still use hand tools. And here I use I chisel out the parts that need to, or the wood that needs to get removed. It's, to be honest, yes, it is time consuming, but it's also, I mentioned this before, a great pleasure. And I kind of love to use those chisels and like the old style of making joinery. I just love it. And like I said, as long as you do not lose too much time, there's nothing wrong with it. I think, if I remember correctly, this bench, I sell it for at least $300, and the material cost is, yeah, because it's used material in this case, it's pretty much nothing. So if you're like a professional woodworker who needs to make a living from it, it's pretty much not the most effective method to do this, because it's just time consuming. But if you do it on the side, like a little bit of furniture on the side to sell on I don't know, I usually sell on Facebook Marketplace, you can still make good money with it. I think for me it was like, let's say, a full day of work, which means 8 hours around is, well, maybe a little less, and I sell this for, like I said, for $300 at least. This gives you kind of, yeah, because the material was pretty much nothing, you could say $300 of profit, which also means, what is it, around, yeah, a little less than, I think, $40 an hour or so, which is still pretty good, I think. But I mean, when it comes to selling furniture, everything depends on the area you live in, and I think, depending on the area, you could easily ask $400 to $500 for it, or even more if you use hardwood. Or if I would have used hardwood for this, I would have not asked less than, I think, $600 for that type of a bench, probably more. So after the legs are done, I use, or the part of the dovetail joinery from the legs, I use the legs as a template to mark the dovetails on the seat. And again, it definitely is a little bit time consuming to do the old-fashioned way, but yeah, I just love it. For me, it's always a great pleasure to do, especially joinery with hand. And I think dovetail joinery is kind of the it's a dovetail joint is for me, it is the king of joinery. Not the most difficult joinery for a woodworker, but this is what we woodworkers are known for. It's the dovetail joinery. So I think for me, it's always the dovetail joinery. It's, like I said, my most favorite joinery of all. Yeah, I used this little handsaw. I always forget what the name is for the little handsaw. Probably someone can write down this in the comments, the name of that little handsaw, to remove most of the material so that I can finish the rest with the chisel. So, and then it comes to the first dry fit. And it fits. Nice. It's probably not my best dovetail joint that I made in the past, but it still looks good. Let's say good enough. And for this type of furniture, this rustic furniture, it's definitely more than good enough. So for the other side, I needed a little bit of rework, but it also fitted. Looks great. And one thing with dovetails is, maybe not everyone probably would agree with me, but if your dovetail is or if your joint is tight, then, and when it comes to the glue up, you see this in just a second. In my opinion, and yeah, I wanna really point this out. It's my opinion. If the joint is tight, you do not need clamps when it comes to the glue up. You also do not need a lot of glue, because yeah, if the joint is tight, lots of glue would ooze out anyway, or probably if the joint is even too tight, you may not be able to fit those parts together anymore, because the water in the wood glue kind of makes the wood expand, and then the joint does not fit anymore. So I checked it. Everything is in the right angle. Everything looks nice. I do a little bit of clean up here to remove, to break down those sharp edges. And as I said, I do not need to use clamps. And I think if a joint is tight, I mentioned this before, you do not need clamps. But it's my personal opinion. If you have another opinion, feel free to write it down in the comments. Feel free to write down everything that I did wrong in your opinion. There's nothing wrong with it. I can take it. So here is my favorite part again, this staining. But for this, because in this case I use some oil stain, I apply pre-stain. And again, this is my personal opinion. So this will get I think a provincial stain, but even the pre-stain here, which looks kind of like I would apply some oil, I like the look of that. I know lots of people do not like the yellow look of wood, especially for softwood, but I think it looks nice. It gives a more natural look. So even if I would have used oil here, I would have preferred that. But yeah, that's it wasn't wished for this project, so that's why I use a Minworks Provincial oil-based stain. But it's, yeah, the stain looks also very good. But like I said, my personal opinion is this yellow rustic look of oil on softwood still looks great, especially when it has this old rustic rough lumber. But this I think it was a provincial. The color was provincial, Minwax provincial. It also looks, in my opinion, it looks fantastic. I really like the look of the stain here. And here you can really see those dovetail joinery. I think it looks fantastic. I love it. And as I mentioned before, I usually sell those furniture on Facebook Marketplace. I have nothing but, or let's say, most of my experiences with that is good. And yeah, like always, if you like that video, please give me a thumbs up, write a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.